When the evidence is identified about the criminal negligence, criminal contempt for due process, criminal contempt for the rule of law, and criminal contempt for the tradition claimed to be the English tradition of fairness and compliance with objective evidence and evidence-based rights and entitlements for justice that targets of injustice are supposed to be entitled to under the claimed English law. So the evidence shows that the regime that is fronted by Boris Johnson and the regime that has somebody like George Eustice, incumbent in the post of Secretary of State in the department that allegedly has the rights to commit murder of Geronimo. Even somebody as kind of clearly identified as the father of Boris Johnson, Stanley Johnson, has been moved to condemn the attack and the plot to murder Geronimo as a murderous errand. These are not words that are said often about any of the policies that Boris Johnson fronts in his position as the incumbent in the post of Prime Minister at the expense of the UK. Even Stanley Johnson would not say murderous errand if he wasn't convinced that it was a murderous errand. And Stanley Johnson, until now, has not been known for condemning any of Boris Johnson's regime and its policies as murderous. In fact, as we have said, Stanley Johnson is the one, along with his daughter Rachel Johnson, who came out in support of Boris Johnson and said that Boris Johnson's attack on the Muslim women wearing burqa looked like bank robbers. And both Rachel Johnson and Stanley Johnson said on the record that in condemning the Muslim women in the way that he had done, Boris Johnson had not gone far enough. So Stanley Johnson is not somebody that is known to be critical of Boris Johnson. His son, his biological son, Stanley Johnson has not criticized Boris Johnson as a rule on the records. Most of the times, despite the fact that Stanley Johnson is associated with the policy in terms of Brexit, Stanley Johnson is associated with the policy of opposing Brexit. But even that has not got him, Stanley Johnson, to any stage where he has condemned Brexit or any of Boris Johnson Brexiteering excessive claims, including the claim that millions of Turks would descend, hordes of Turks would descend and enter the UK if the UK didn't leave the European Union. This is the Times. This is the Times doing the piece on Geronimo on page 17 on Wednesday, the 11th of August. And this one is the one that contains a heartfelt, kind of emotional statement by Geronimo's original mom in New Zealand, who bred him and who misses him. And she used the occasion, the day that she agreed to let Geronimo go. And this is the Daily Mirror on Monday, the 9th of August, that coincided with the date when a group of people marched to Downing Street for Geronimo. And what we have seen in the coverage of this is the Sun publishing the account about the plan at that stage by Helen, Geronimo's mom in Gloucestershire, to put on the live stream camera. And this is the Sun on the Sun pages. There are 2 pages on the Sun on that date, which is the Wednesday, the 11th of August. So 2 days ago, Wednesday, the 11th of August, this Sun. And we are doing this so that anyone who has not actually had the chance to look at the papers of the last few days can see them. This is on the record, so you can rewind and you can look at what we are going through again. This is page 17 of the Metro, that is based in London. It's a morning paper controlled by the Daily Mail Group on Tuesday, the 10th of August. And this one has got a insert picture of Stanley Johnson. Stanley Johnson is there. That is Stanley Johnson. And what he is quoted as saying is the phrase "murderous errand," and Stanley Johnson wants the cull halted, that is the murder. And this is a piece by Rod Minchin. And the caption to the picture reads, "Guardians of the Alpaca. Supporters on farm with Helen and doomed Geronimo insert." This is the picture. And this is the item about Geronimo. Let's read kind of put the piece there. And this is the piece on page 5 of the Daily Mail on the Tuesday, the 10th of August. And that has got both the picture of the people who had demonstrated in Downing Street, as well as Helen standing with Geronimo. So that's the demonstration in Downing Street. And this is the full page of the Daily Mail on page 5 of Tuesday, the 10th of August. And we come back to today. Now, before we come back to today, we take another look at the Times on Tuesday, the 10th of August, which has got questions and answers about Geronimo. It's like the baby. The mom is holding on to the baby, who has been absolutely healthy, and within his space in Gloucestershire, in the farm where he lives with his mom, Helen, he has been running around, bouncing about. Now, our campaign is not originally able to make any empirical comment about the life of Geronimo or anybody similar to Geronimo or any animal. We are going entirely by the evidence. And what we are saying is that the behavior of the Boris Johnson fronted government, is unlawful and illegal. And we shall talk about the unlawfulness and the illegality in this updated edition, because the law, the concept of law is not based on the idea of let's say racism or patriotism. That it is not, the concept of law is not based on the concept of darkness. The darkness that is being regularly found in the behavior of some dictators like Viktor Orban in Hungary. International condemnation against Hungary is almost a daily event. And the condemnation by the West of Lukashenko, as well as has been highlighted during the attempted kidnap of a critic of the Olympic team from Lukashenko's country in Tokyo only in the last few weeks. And today, yesterday, the day before, all the mainstream Fleet Street newspapers have been reporting events in Afghanistan in uniform ways. Uniform in the sense that the Taliban is the bad ones, and the Western troops and the Western occupation was the counter to the Taliban. That is to say, the good ones. So what is the definition of good ones? Ask Geronimo and you will not get any answer. Of course, Geronimo is not verbal, is not vocal in the human sense of the terms. But had Geronimo been able to speak, Geronimo would say that the way his mom, Helen, has been tortured, as she told The Guardian, the behavior of the British government would resemble the behavior of the Taliban. Think about that. Geronimo's mom, Helen, has told The Guardian that she has been tortured. She felt like she has been tortured. She feels like she is being tortured. And Helen said to other British mainstream media before that she feels she has been punished. I mean, what kind of words could an objective observer of events in Afghanistan use to describe the targets of the Taliban, the targets supposedly looking forward to or looking up to the Western occupiers for salvation, for relief, for freedom, from emancipation, from the brutal, disgusting regime or tyranny that Taliban is about to impose, or to use the contextual references, reimpose on most of the country, Afghanistan. Geronimo would not see any acceptable evidence of behavior by the Boris Johnson government, by George Eustice, or by the so far unnamed liars that have been defaming Geronimo, that have been branding Helen as a liar. Now, Helen is not somebody who came by the situation or came upon the situation or encountered, if you like, the experience by accident. She is an experienced nurse. She is an experienced nurse who knows about animals, cares about animals. And at age 50, she has been caring for animals, and she loves animals. And for the past 4 years, her compassion, her dedication have been tested to the limit. And how has the DEFRA behaved? The DEFRA, as experienced by their victim, the target, Helen, has felt like the victims of the Taliban. Is this comparison so inappropriate, unjustified? If this is, let DEFRA deny it. Not my words. Let DEFRA deny on the record today what Helen has been saying in public for 4 years. And in the last fortnight, she has been saying more increasingly, more extensively to the world. Let DEFRA, item by item, take on Helen and say that she has been wrong on the facts and that she has been careless on the facts and that Geronimo has been ill. Helen says Geronimo is well, and the world can see Geronimo is well. So let DEFRA say that Geronimo is well, not well. Let them list the evidence or the components of the evidence showing and saying that Geronimo is not well. Because DEFRA have been persisting in refusing to let Geronimo be properly, objectively, scientifically, and honestly tested. DEFRA are the ones who are refusing to test. What are they afraid of? What are they trying to hide? Early on, the Daily Mail reported that, or one of the papers reported, that the real reason why DEFRA are being unreasonable is nothing to do with Geronimo's state of health. But they want to use Geronimo as an example. They want to murder an innocent, healthy Geronimo in order to terrify, scare other animal owners and farmers. Think about that. This is not the behavior of a savior civilizing society. This is the behavior of a Taliban type society. Taliban as portrayed and painted by the British media, as portrayed and painted by the British government occupying propaganda machine. The Taliban are the bad ones and the British are the good ones. And Geronimo, by the British, has been treated as soullessly, as cruelly, as negligently, as contemptibly by the British government as the Taliban is accused of treating the ordinary Afghans. Think about that. Rewind this and think about what I have been saying. As I said yesterday, that is Thursday, and I had said before in other references, the judgment by the UK Supreme Court, now the Supreme Court I put within quotation marks because of reasons I have explained on the evidence. The Supreme Court is not the type of Supreme Court that the American Supreme Court is imaged to be. All the victims of the injustice, all the victims historically of the injustice meted out by the or in the name of or through the US Supreme Court will know that the Supreme Court is far from the supreme source of justice. So let's put that on the one side for the moment. When the victims of the Tony Blair regime generally, and Tony Blair's foreign secretary at the time, Jack Straw, when the victims of Jack Straw's collusion with the particular series of rendition, that is to say, hijacking and kidnapping of supposed enemies of freedom, like Belhaj, the Libyan dissident, when he was kidnapped from the Southeast Asia, either Thailand or Singapore or Malaysia, whatever, when he was kidnapped in the name of fighting terror, in the name of doing the war on terror, the Americans did that rendition with the complicity and with the collusion, with the knowledge of Jack Straw generally and his Foreign Office in particular. And they tortured this Belhaj. The Americans tortured Belhaj with the knowledge and tacit approval and collusion of the UK regime. So that was many years before the Belhaj claim against Jack Straw reached the United Kingdom Supreme Court, so-called. And the Supreme Court, absolutely patriotically and on the evidence, and nothing but the evidence, decided that Jack Straw had done wrong. And in delivering the ruling on behalf of the Supreme Court on that case, in that case, about that case, let's say, whichever phrase you want to use to connect, then President of the Supreme Court, who incidentally was the first incumbent in that particular post, David Neuberger. Neuberger is a Jewish person of Jewish origin, and he is related to Julia Neuberger, the rabbi, the Jewish rabbi. So Neuberger, I said the Jewish origin because in their history, they are very familiar with the torture and denial of human rights and threat to human rights and genocide and massacre and all the rest of it. So Neuberger was not an accidental kind of party to deliver the judgment of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. I'm not reading the thing because I'm so familiar with the whole ruling. I don't have to read. I don't have to have anything in front of me. That was a judgment done on the 17th of January, 2017. Now, 2017 is the year when Geronimo arrived in the UK. Did Geronimo know? Or did Helen know? Helen know that somebody like me would be connecting Geronimo's fate with the fate of Belhaj? Remember, I said earlier, evidentially, that the treatment of Geronimo and Helen MacDonald by DEFRA and the UK government resembles the treatment by the Taliban of ordinary, peace-loving, innocent Afghans. That's what I've said. And any comparison, factual, evidential comparison, would take that particular equation and that particular likeness. Now, in the judgment delivered on behalf of the Supreme Court by David Neuberger against the British government treatment of Belhaj and others that are not as extensively mentioned in the judgment as Belhaj himself. They said, David Neuberger said, he made a reference to the Magna Carta. How many hundreds of years ago? The reason why he and the Supreme Court mentioned the Magna Carta is not a thing in passing. It's of the absolute paramount importance about the rule of law, about the English British justice. And in the hundreds of years since that particular statement contained in the Magna Carta was conceived, nothing has been found to have been expressed in that very fundamental, very original way as is found in the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta is not something that is treated as a thing in passing. In passing, as I said, it's of the absolute central importance. What is the Magna Carta? Let's look at the Magna Carta and how it is described in the entry about it in the Wikipedia, let's say. So the description of Magna Carta and it says within brackets, Magna Carta Libertatum. It's a medieval Latin for Great Charter of Freedoms, commonly called Magna Carta, also Magna Charta, Great Charter. And it is a royal charter of rights agreed to by King John of England at Runnymede, near Windsor. on 15th of June 1215. And it was first drafted by Archbishop of Canterbury Stephen Langton to make peace between the unpopular king and a group of rebel barons. It promised the protection of church rights, protection for the barons from illegal imprisonment, access to swift justice, and limitations on feudal payments to the crown, to be implemented through a council of 25 barons. Neither side stood behind their commitments, and the charter was annulled by Pope Innocent III, leading to the First Barons' War. But that's not the end of it. Why? We'll come to that. Now the Supreme Court case is called Belhagen and other respondents and Straw and others appellants. And it's the date and it's the judgment given on 17th of January 2017, and the appeal case was heard on the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th of November 2015. So took 2 years almost to 2 calendar years, let's say, to publish the ruling. And it was heard by Lord Neuberger. I'm putting Lord within quotation marks. I can't say it every time, but that is how it should be perceived and seen and treated. Neuberger, President, Lady Hale, Deputy President, and the others, all within quotation marks, Lord, Mans, Clark, Wilson, Sumpton, and Hughes. This Sumpton, who has been featuring in the news as a former Supreme Court judge, was there as well. And on item 4, it says, Mr. Belhaj and Mrs. Bodshar allege that the United Kingdom procured this detention in all these places by common design with the Libyan and US authorities. They allege that they suffered mistreatment amounting to torture at the hands of the US agents in Bangkok and in the airplane, and at the hands of the Libyan officials in Libya. Now, remember, that is the word torture that Helen MacDonald has told The Guardian she has been subjected to. So what they are saying, the DEFRA liars, amounts to denials stated on behalf of the Jack Straw-fronted regime. If George Eustace has got any sense, and if the so-called legal advisors have got any sense, they would stop the attacks on Geronimo. Because as we have said, and as I have said in elaborate details, in addition to their wrongs against Helen and Geronimo, the UK government has been wrong against Helen, in their behavior against Helen. Because Helen's domestic law rights as a human being and her rights in international law and in human rights have been violated without any appearance of recognition of those rights and any appearance of the obligations under those rights. The DEFRA, Justice, et al. Are under and have been under and will remain under. As I have been saying, I'll come to that in a short while. Now, in the news item published by an outlet called Middle East Eye at 1750 UTC on 17th of January 2017, the heading was "Tortured Libyan Dissident Wins Right to Sue UK Government." And the subheading is Abdul Hakim Belhaj and wife Fatima Budshah win right to sue officials and institutions, including ex-Foreign Secretary, over 2004 abduction. And the caption to the picture of Abdul Hakim Belhaj reads, "All 7 Supreme Court judges ruled in favor of Abdul Hakim Belhaj's claim for being abducted and tortured." And the main report was circulated at that stage by the French news agency AFP. And the first paragraph reads, Britain's former Foreign Secretary, Jack Straw, and a former senior MI6 officer, Mark Allen, on Tuesday suffered a devastating defeat at the hands of Britain's top judges over the abduction and subsequent torture of Abdul Hakim Belhaj, a prominent opponent of the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Straw and Allen, backed by Britain's security service and MI6, lost a 4-year battle to prevent Belhaj and his wife Fatima Budshah from suing for liability and from demanding compensation in a British court. The UK Supreme Court flatly rejected Straw and Allen's claims that the case should be dismissed and could not be heard in a British court on the grounds that the agents of the British state and the CIA agents, Libyan authorities, and those of other countries were involved in the rendition operation. Straw, who served as Foreign Secretary under Tony Blair from 2001 to 2006, and Allen, who was knighted in 2005, relied on the doctrine of the so-called state immunity and foreign act of state. Belhaj, then leader of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, and his wife were seized in Malaysia and Thailand after tip-off from MI6. They were flown to Tripoli in a CIA plane. The operation took place in 2004 when Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, was enthusiastically befriending Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. So it was brought out in the course of the case that the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, was lying, as was Jack Straw, as was the security services, because all of them knew and were involved in Tony Blair's befriending of Muammar Gaddafi when they allowed the torture of an opponent of Muammar Gaddafi at the time. Think about that. These are things that surely neither Jack Straw nor Tony Blair nor any of the actual physical torturers of Belhaj and his wife could foresee. They thought that they would get away because it's a state immunity that they were claiming. What immunity are they claiming against Geronimo and against Helen MacDonald? What they have been doing against Helen MacDonald in order to justify their plot to murder Geronimo amounts to their assumption of impunity from accountability, impunity from due process, impunity from rule of law. Think about that. What they've been doing in the at the paragraph 272 of the judgment of the Supreme Court in the Belhaj case against the British government, 272 reads as follows. The significant point for present purposes is that the core prohibition in international law of detention without legal basis or recourse to the courts corresponds to a fundamental principle of English public policy, like English law's rejection of torture. Think about what Helen MacDonald has told The Guardian. English law's rejection of torture, it is an essential feature of our constitutional order. It has traditionally been traced, at any rate since the time of Sir Edward Coke, to the 29th article of Magna Carta. Charles James Fox is not always a useful source of constitutional principle, but most lawyers would agree with his famous description of the writ of habeas corpus as the great palladium of the liberties of the subject. The principle underlying the writ is that the availability of recourse to a court to test the legality of detention is the hallmark of its constitutionality. Indeed, although the position has in some respects been modified by statute, at common law, the reach of the writ of habeas corpus has even been held to extend to anywhere in the world where a servant of the crown or any other person amenable to the personal jurisdiction of the court has detained a person, ex parte Anderson, 1861, that is a case, or appears to be in a position to procure his production. The case is Rahmatullah against the Secretary of State, 2013 case, Court of Appeal. Now, I turn, that is David Neuberger, the President of the Supreme Court, reading the ruling of the Supreme Court on 17th of January 2017, I turn to rendition and enforced disappearance, both of which are aggravated forms of arbitrary detention. Rendition is an archaic expression which was once more or less synonymous with extradition. The Oxford English Dictionary, in its supplement for September 2006, defines rendition, extraordinary rendition, as the seizure and transportation by authorities of a criminal suspect from one country to another without the formal process of extradition, sometimes used spec with reference to moving a terrorist suspect for interrogation in a country considered to have less rigorous regulation for the humane treatment of prisoners. That's the Oxford English Dictionary supplement of September 2006. Now, Neuberger then says, I shall take it to have the meaning given to it by the Belhaj claimants in their particular subclaim, namely a euphemism commonly used since about 2001 to describe covert unlawful abduction organized and carried out by state agents across international borders for the purpose of unlawful detention, interrogation, and or torture. The context of Mr. Rahmatullah's pleading shows that he is using it in the same sense. Enforced disappearance was described by Legat J in R. A. Al-Sadoun versus Secretary of State for Defense, a 2015 case, as a concept recognized in international law and a practice which is internationally condemned. It involves detention outside the protection of the law, where there is a refusal by the state to acknowledge the detention or disclose the fate of the person who has been detained. Its cruelty and vice lie in the facts that the disappeared person is completely isolated from the outside world and in the mercy of their captors, and that the person's family is denied knowledge of what has happened to them. Remember, we're talking about torture and detention and denial of due process. Enforced disappearance is a violation of Article 5 of the European Human Rights Convention in the case of persons within the jurisdiction of a convention state. Kurt versus Turkey is a 1998 case. In December 2006, the United Nations adopted a draft convention for the protection of all persons from enforced disappearance, which seeks to provide more generally for enforced disappearance. The convention came into force in December 2010 It has to date been signed by 94 states and ratified by 45. But the parties do not include the United Kingdom, the United States, Malaysia, or Libya. Thailand is a signatory but has not ratified. In these circumstances, I consider that the convention has nothing to contribute to the issues on this appeal. However, even in the absence of specific rules of international law relating to rendition and enforced disappearance, a prohibition of these practices is necessarily compromised in the more general prohibition of arbitrary detention by other international instruments, notably Article 9 of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. The United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention was surely right to say, paragraph 60, that secret and or incommunicado detention constitutes the most heinous violation of the norm protecting the right to liberty of human beings under customary international law. The arbitrariness is inherent in these forms of deprivation of liberty, as the individual is left outside the cloak of any legal protection. Now, we go to Magna Carta 1225, Article 29, which has been quoted by the Supreme Court judgment in the ruling against the government of UK in the case of Belhaj and another, that is his wife. Quote, no free man shall be taken or imprisoned or dispossessed of his liberties or be outlawed or exiled or in any way destroyed, nor will we condemn him, include the woman as well, him and her, nor will we commit him or her to prison, excepting by the legal judgment of his peers or by the laws of the land. To none will we sell, to none will we deny, to none will we delay right or justice. Now, the question is, have supporters of Geronimo considered beyond what the DEFRA interpretation of the limits of the courts of law are? Because in our view, not only this ruling, but others in context and the statements entitled Helen and Geronimo to a series of yet untested but available challenges through the court system. We said on the Twitter yesterday, we assert that the Magna Carta's sentence cited by Neuberger and quoted by us is a rare and magnificent statement that must rank as one of the more civilizing statements ever to be made by any English juror or judge or constitutionalist. We repeat this one now today. We assert again, as we have been doing these past few days as part of our support and argument for Geronimo, that Geronimo is more than a mere alpaca. That Geronimo has legitimately, morally, ethically raised more pure ethical moral awareness than all the sitting MPs on all sides and on all sections of the benches in the present House of Commons and the House of Peers, that Geronimo's plight and his mom Helen's struggle to save him and to protect that she has called torture constitute absolute evidence of the darkness of Little England. That a licensed law trading moron, barrister Keir Starmer, cannot see the darkness is proof that he is morally blind, intellectually lacking in the key capacity, and ethically dead. And that he, Starmer, never did have the true forensic skills which the idiot Corbyn ascribed to him. What am I